Fulldomes are part of our DNA at i-DAT. We have our little dome there where FDUK sort of was born, if you like. And I've also had the pleasure of working with a whole bunch of different kinds of artists in Fulldome and parallel dimensions, such as VR and stuff. And what I wanted to talk about was this sort of perspectival shift that's kind of happening, both in terms of artists' practice, the technologies that are operating, and here we can see this and have been seeing this evolution of the Fulldome, kind of escaping from the planetarium and its scientific models in representation and thought to a much more kind of open, engaging, qualitative arts practice-based stuff, which is a wonderful recursive feedback loop in terms of then the pollination of those disciplines that were interested in visualization and stuff like that. So this is we see as a real enrichment, and part of the A.L.N process is to enable that to happen further. And so I'm starting with one of my favorite paintings, actually. It is a bit of a painting, and this is Crivelli's Annunciation. And it's a kind of classical perspectival model with the vanishing point. And one of the key things, I think, is with this dissolution, the fragmentation, the kind of particle cloud that now exists around these disciplines and these ideas is fundamentally a sort of a recapturing of something that was lost through the evolution of arts practice, and it became very much a focus on the objet d'art, the thing, the material thing. But you can see here that although this has the perfect geometry of the vanishing point, and multiple vanishing points in this case, it is very much a spiritual, it's baby Jesus thing going on there. And you can see the kind of dove from above here, the kind of interplanetary sperm happening. That moment is captured within this wonderful geometry, and a wonderful geometry that actually leaks out of the painting, as you can see here, into the 3D world that we kind of inhabit, with the gourd and the apple kind of hanging off the picture frame. But for me, this bit is the important bit. It is this parallel dimension that emerges in here. Obviously, this refers to the spiritual, heaven, etc. But it is also a sign of this dematerialization of the artwork. And as that evolved through a history of art which kind of goes off all over the place and in wonderful places, really that fragmentation and that dematerialization came to an absolute fantastic point at the turn of the century, with Cubism, which in itself, when it destroyed the perspectival point of view and the vanishing point into this myriad of simultaneous representation of powers that were just becoming apparent at the time in terms of particle physics, the quantum, was all very much embedded in this shattering of that perspective model. And that, of course, gave birth to a massive range of arts practices which were fascinated by that immateriality of the art object. And this is Moholy-Nagy's light modulator. You can see it working here. And again, the fundamental aspect of this piece, the kinetic artwork, was that it wasn't about the sculpture at all. It was about the reflected light that bounced around the gallery space that it was exhibited in. So instantly you start seeing the shift from the thing to the environment, which, of course, as Fulldome people, as VR people, were starting to recognize that that reflected light is fundamental. And that same practice evolved through Black Mountain College and the like to a fantastic, not quite full dome, but an amazing dome that took place in 1970 in Osaka, Japan, which was the Experiments in Art and Technology, where you had the likes of Billy Kluver from Bell Labs setting up with Rauschenberg, developing this amazing kind of fun palace. And again, the dome, in this case a mylar dome, focusing very much on the virtual reflected image in this dome, was fundamental to your experience of operating within it. Now, this kind of explosion or this dematerialization sort of entered then the digital space, and these are some of the artists I've worked with both through the PhD program that we run, which is kind of overseen by Roy Ascott. Tekla Shiphorse, for instance, her work with Merce Cunningham, who was very much part of the EAT Experiments in Art and Technology work, and I'm sure you all remember Life Forms, that work that was used to produce digital choreography for Merce Cunningham's ballets, to one of the classic VR pieces from the 90s. Again, an amazing amnesia in that we forget these things actually happened kind of in the 90s. It wasn't just the bad hairstyles that we forget. It's the fact that we were practicing and rehearsing something here, which is now kind of pretty easy to do. I mean, this was part of the soft image software running on silicon graphics machines to create these immersive pieces called Osmos and Ephemer. And it cost about $100,000 to put on one of these pieces. And again, as with Shehzad's work, it's an individual experience. But you did get the pleasure of watching the person behind a curtain, behind a semi-transparent screen, having that experience. To people like Marcus Novak. So again, looking at how not just the art object dematerialize, but actually the disciplines themselves start to fall to bits under the pressure of this kind of shift in perspective. So choreography, the digitalness, the digitization of the body, the digitization of the experiencer of that artwork through Shah's work, to people like Marcus Novak's work, now part of the Alisphere project in Santa Barbara. His work with the dematerialization or liquefaction of architecture back in the 90s with liquid architecture, again, is now manifest in Fulldome environments. Donna Cox's work, again, all these are PhD graduates from the Planetary Collegium. Her work with Bob and the Advanced Visualization Unit. I'm sure you've all seen their work. Classic pieces. To the likes of, I didn't put David McGonville's artwork up because actually he's wearing it on his arm there. That's his post-PhD tattoo of the Copernican universe there, just having had that done. But if you want to see this kind of trajectory and the evolution of the Fulldome, there is not a better kind of tracking of this than Cosmological Cinema, which David produced a little while ago. So this shift is fundamentally, this spherical perspective, it is the place that we now see the world in, increasingly. The square screen, the frame, has dissolved around us. And this shift as well has allowed us not just to look outside of these particular barriers of our earthly space, but also a shift in perspective that we are now looking back at the place that we live on from massive distances and through massive representations of huge data sets to tiny data sets. This is an atomic force microscopy height map landscape generated from AFM data looking at the atomic forces at a nanoscopical level in Blender, to visualizations of other forces. This is MRI data, DICOM imagery placed. Actually, we'll be looking at this in the Fulldome thing. To then a dissolution of the very practice of making this stuff too. Marie-Claude and myself and Phil are going to be doing a little skit after coffee in the Dome talking about EMDL stuff. But what was amazing about this project, and I won't say much more about it other than to say that it was this melting pot of different practitioners coming together to rethink the Dome and this dissolved image from a range of perspectives. And I'm just going to kind of end on the manifestation of the art object again back into this dissolved space. Now, I'm one of the navigation aids that we developed, which we'll show not in its full glory, but just on mobile phones, is the phage technology that we were working on as part of the Fulldome. And you've this was a mobile phone, Android with a little Arduino on it, which allowed you to get various interactions into the phone, but also then to generate through an OSC connection the kind of absolute pointer. Was it an absolute pointer? Not the SAT iPhone one, but the Android open source one, I should say, which allows you to navigate multiple users around the space. And we'll have this running, hopefully. Does it? Hopefully. In the dome in a bit, which allowed you to interact with various pieces. We won't be able to show Dimitri's work, unfortunately, because it doesn't quite get that far in the run-through. But this dematerialization or rematerialization of this kind of art object into different kinds of spaces manifests itself in a work that we did, again, working with some fantastic collaborators like Guy Nova and Immersive, to make this huge installation at the launch of the Tate Modern Switch House just this summer. And in many ways, this is actually an inverted dome. It's a multi-screen, touchscreen structure that we created. Here you can see it here. Hopefully we've got the videos play. Oh, rather jerkily. Sorry about that. That's supposed to be smooth. But you can see this space. We had 197,000 people came through this space in 4 days. Incredible kind of engagement with people. But the object itself was very much like that phage technology, manifest much larger, but actually an inversion of the dome. This is using exactly the same technology that we were working in the piece that you'll see there after break with the MDL work, in that it's all using Unity game engine stuff. All the OSC connections are coming into that. We were running real-time Twitter feeds through it as well to create the behavioral flocking of the objects that you would interact with in this space. So it's this kind of inversion or re-solidification of the art object into or through these full dome technologies, which I think is really quite liberating in terms of an arts practice. It's kind of like architecture. It's kind of like the management of behavior of people around it in terms of choreography, etc. Now, this stuff, these perspectival shifts, have been written about. I mean, this is Douglas Adams and the total perspective vortex. She saw in one instant the whole of infinity of creation and herself in relationship to it. That's exactly the experience I first had in Uniview, or the Aleph, yes, the only place on earth where all places are, seen from every angle, each standing clear without any confusion or blending, apart obviously in the Blendy Dome. And of course, this space where all these disciplines and materialities come together within the chronosynclastic infundibulum is Vonnegut's kind of description of the full dome environment. To end, just to reference McGonville again and the kind of optical nervous system piece he did based on Alan Watts's voiceover, that mashup from 2005, I think it was. The only way really we can engage with these perspectival shifts is through the very limited sensory tools that we have, and fundamentally our eyes are part of that. So this quote, so if you want to know what it is, how the inside of your head feels, then open your eyes, because that's where it all comes together. And I think in terms of setting up the agenda for the Fulldome UK session that we've got following on from this, we've got Pedro, is going to blow your minds away, as usual. That actually, if you want to know how the inside of your head feels, then you open your eyes and your ears. But I think what we're also looking at is a perspectival shift in terms of our practice, which is so kind of wonderfully engaging. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Thank you.